Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for that. Um, well, Bente, when we start, I think it might help people to get an idea of the context in which you've used and worked with the PAA. So can you say a little bit about, I think you've changed jobs, so where you've worked and where you're now working?
Yeah. Well, when I started out learning the DMM, I was working in a child protection institution, the Aline Center, that was situated in Oslo, taking care of infant families. They were admitted by the Child Protection Services. I was there for 12 years, and that's where I learned the AI and also the PAA and the Care Index. And then I went on to work as a psychologist in a municipality outside of Oslo. I was there for a couple of years, and after that I went into a hospital setting, a clinic for child and adolescent psychiatry. I worked there for 13 years, and I used just recently stopped that job. So that was the job I had where I must say I used the DMM more thoroughly in therapeutic setting. So as I worked there in the clinic, we used PAA, did the strange situation with most families. And so that's when I started to have the opportunity to know something about what can I do with this observation task? How can it be used to strengthen the families, how to inform families and make them interested in what we were observing? Because just doing assessments, I needed a reason to do it. I needed the families to feel that this had a purpose. So that's where when I contacted you, when my plan was last year to go to England and to work on these issues, and then the COVID came, so it all got ruined. But in the meantime, everything got so clogged up at the hospital, and I think they were trying to shut down the work on my team. So that's when I was asked to start to work in a foundation. So now I work at a foundation called the Church City Mission in Oslo. This is a foundation that was started in 1850s, and it has been working for ages. But they have an institution for families with infants and toddlers. So I'm back working in child protection in a way. But I find it valuable because we now follow our families over a long time, and they live in apartments where we are a team working with each family to do assessments, but much of the time is about to help them reach their own goals to be parents for the child. So yeah, so that's what I do.
I know you believe very much that, or have found video work with parents to be particularly useful. Mm-hmm. Given that the PAI is in a way an assessment of the child, not the parent, I wonder if you can say a little bit about how useful the work is and how you use it with parents in particular.
Yeah, but I think it's when you put the dyad in front of a camera, even if it's a Care Index or if you do the SSP or the PAA, it's about the two of them. They have the child in focus, but it's how the child organizes his or her behavior to the parent in order to make sure that the parent is taken care of or attending to the child. But what in my experience, the parents often found the PAA interesting because they were given a task and a purpose, compared to the Care Index, which I have used a lot. And Care Index is much easier to do because you don't need all the equipment. But with the Care Index, at least with families that are are struggling with self-confidence, they don't feel they want to do the right thing. You put them in front of the camera and you can just feel how they struggle to do the right thing, trying to read our minds. And the task is play with your child. It's quite an open task. So in my experience, the parents often feel that this is, they don't know what to do. And when they look through the videos, they often feel they've done something they shouldn't do, or they should have done more. So I think the challenge with that is that you often come into the discussion of doing with a child more than reflecting on how the child is feeling. What is the expression of the child's face? How do you feel when you look at it? So when I started using the PAA more systematically in the hospital setting, my experience was, in many cases at least, that the parents had, when they were given a task, they knew what they were going to do. We were instructing them to, you should sit in this chair, you can help your child get along with the toys, but then go back to your chair, and when you hear the knock, this is what's going to happen. So they would have a clear guidelines what to do, not how to do it, but what to do. And I think that, in my experience is that parents felt that they had a purpose, and I was surprised that even parents with quite low cognitive functioning could be very curious about what happened, and also start to think about what's going to happen next, because the parents would come in and look into the room where the child was waiting for them. And so this gave me that clear idea that, we are assessing attachment relationship, but the attachment is actually going on right in front of us. And so that's that. It gave me an opportunity to set up kind of a therapeutic setting with parents, just to go through. With some parents, we could just use an hour for a couple of minutes, because those couple of minutes were so important for the parents to go through. So that's how it all started. And
So in a way, you're saying that by giving the parents clear guidelines as to what to do, it shifts the focus away from talking about what we do, but actually talking about the relationship.
Yes, and also it's very clear when you. I think the setup of the strange situation is brilliant, because it's gradually increasing the stress in the child, and you have attachment behavior elicited, and then and the parent, so the feelings, what is going on, the parents can have an idea how the child is going to respond next. And with this, I realized that the parents were quite curious. They were, wondering what will happen, and also they could be quite surprised by what went on. So we had all these openings to talk about what happened in the parent. What was surprising? What did you expect? and through that kind of focus, you more easily came in contact with their own experiences. And I don't think I've ever gone through any of these videos with parents without them recognizing that something had happened in their own childhood that was relevant to this.
So is that also within, when you work within the child protection context with it, as well as the therapeutic?
Yeah, but in the hospital, most of our families that were that came to us came through child protection. So I have had cases where this went very bad, and the parents got very upset with everything. But there was one case where the child was very malnutritioned, and the mother had not fed the child properly. So there's so many issues that came up. And so she was so confronted that she didn't want to go through with it. But that is, one out of, 50 or so. So the most of them found this very useful. And I must say that I could have an idea about what the classification would be. But my focus was not so much in telling about that as to make this an opportunity for the parents to open up and go into it and see. I think my goal was to actually see if the parent would find that they had missed something in their own life that they realized that the child needed, so that you could, how to deal with it. You're in kind of in the same boat, as we could say in Norwegian, but so how can you make sure that your child is being understood if you need the same experience to be understood or accepted.
So almost the focus on the child makes it easier for the parents to relate that to their own experience, because it seems to me an interesting, if I can use the word, sort of paradox in a way, that we got something, an assessment that's focused, supposedly assessing the child's attachment, and yet what you're really focusing on is just how useful it's been in unpicking the relevance of the parent's past, even though that's not what the assessment is supposedly focusing on at all.
Yeah, it's quite perplexing, because I was also surprised when I just started this work, and I had some very clear ideas on what to do and how to do it, and and then I just realized I had to listen more to the parents, because it was their life, it was their lives and their children. And I think I think they intuitively made it possible for them to reflect and mentalize upon their own life and connect it to what was happening here and now with their child. So for me, as I said, attachment was going on right in front of our eyes, and we could also, the great thing about video, you can stop and you can dwell on things, and you can go back, and then you can have a thought around what happened next, and then you just put on the video and the evidence is there. If for instance a mother would talk about how she thought the reunion was, and she would go on and have a theory around what had happened and what should have happened, and then we could look at it, what actually did come up, and so in many cases this brought up a lot of grief and also anger that was directed mostly to their own past and what they had experienced. So in a way, you had this transgenerational, you know, the themes, the topic was going through generations, and so I thought well, it just amazed me. Yeah.
It strikes me that this is it's something the DMM stresses, that attachment representations are in the here and now, in a way, that we think about the past in the light of the present.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, what we're saying is that, you know, rather than saying, well, okay, to think about the past, we must do an AI. Not that I'm the value of an AI is incredible, but there's also something about looking at the past in that when the parent is faced with their child's experience,
Mm-hmm.
they may be able to make connections spontaneously that that perhaps might be more difficult or even more threatening to do in another context.
Yeah, and you know it, and I think it's not so much if it's true, or if the parent may well be you know, manipulating the whole situation. But the thing is that you can, I think you can, at least that's my experience, you know, when the parent is trying to tell you something you that is correct and not something that is real. And I think and I think that in my experience, by using shorter videotapes of interaction, you get more of that talk, you know, borrowed language, mimicking what I say. I can ask about something and they say, oh yes, that's how, you know, they agree with me, and are easily trying to say what they think I want to hear. But when you're gone through the whole procedure with the strange situation, you are there is less room for that, in a way, because you have the video to lean on, to the evidence is there. But you can also check out what would you have liked it to be, how did you want it to be, and that can be somewhere to head for as a goal or something.
You made a really interesting distinction between what was correct and what was real. Now, too often, I think people are looking for what's correct, not just parents, but professionals. Can you say a bit more about what you meant by that?
Yeah, I think that, well, at least in Norway, there are so many programs and manualized interventions with families that are, in a way, learning, you know, teaching parents a language for everything. You have the Circle of Security talking about shark music and all this, up on the circle and down on the circle, all this language that has no intuitive content. You have to learn what the content is. And I think that is one thing that has always that something I've never gone into, because I think parents have so many words and so many thoughts about what is their lives with their children, and I'm much more interested in what kind of words they put into it, and when we talk around and work around a video, I'm hunting for their words, even if they're bad words, even if the child is I work with one mother, she said this, oh, he's evil now, and I would you know, say that, use that word when we talked about these instances when he was aggressive, etc. And in a way, when I used that word, she would try to, you know, rethink when she saw how upset he was when he was alone, for instance. So that gave us so crucial evidence about what was beneath, below, under that so-called evil behavior.
So the danger of teaching parents even good theory is actually they can use the theory, that the theory takes them further and further away from how they actually feel to how they ought to feel or think they ought to feel. And so we can give them the words in a way as professionals that actually allow to miss the experience of what's actually happening in how do they feel when their child is kind of playing up or threatening them in some way.
Yes, and I think there is a danger in doing that, because if you are a parent that feels pushed up in a corner by child protection or by their own family, or somebody is so harsh and derogating with them, and when we as professionals starts to teach them new ways of talking about themselves and the child, you teaching them new words, they may feel even worse, feeling more low. And then the thing that I fear the most when working with these families are that they will start to direct their frustration towards the child. You cried, you started this, you were evil. I mean, so that this becomes a threat, a bigger threat to the child than whatever was a threat before they came into our care. So I think we should be very careful about what kind of programs we use for these families, and make sure that, I mean, be aware that we can actually do worse. We can harm families.
I think, and I know you're also suspicious of the kind of top-down approach that supplies family with an expert kind of interpretation of their lives. Now, I know there's a kind of tension there, because the PAA, like all the DMM assessments, requires a kind of expert understanding, expertise to make sense of. But it's, there's also a danger in sort of delivering that kind of message from on high. So I just wondered if you would talk about how you kind of reconcile those two, that tension.
Well, I think, the top down is about, talk and tell. And parents very easily identifies that kind of intervention that they should say or produce. And if they don't produce, they get these reports that say they cannot reflect, they cannot mentalize, they cannot this, that, and the other. And so I think that working from the bottom up to have the parents try to feel or acknowledge how they feel, and to from that position generate some ideas. And my goal is to have them to connect with the child, even if the child is aggressive or afraid or turns away when the parents comes back in the room. Whatever the child does, try to understand what is happening and try to connect their own feelings to it, and see if they have a recognition of what does this mean. And I think that if we are just hunting for reflections that comes out of talk, I think that is missing something very important. That I, for instance, have worked now with a mother. She's quite low in her IQ. She's been assessed some years ago, but I mean, she's a poor lady. She's been abandoned by her family. She's been really a black sheep of that family. And she lost her first child 18 years ago, and now she has a baby. and her expectation of how she would do was very low. But when we started, we have, this is an infant, so we have done just the care index tapes, and that we sat there with her, and she started to observe the same things as us. And it was fascinating how she would reflect. But her words were simple. But she could, see that, I mean, she could put the words, her own words, to what was happening, and also to see that, oh, maybe I could talk to her, maybe I could say to her something, even though she doesn't understand the words. So I think that we have too many programs that have an expectation of where parents should fit in, and it's so. I think it's not interesting to work in that way, for me at least. I think to be curious about the parents, and they will be curious about what is happening with them and the child. That's how I think about it.
So moving away from getting parents to do stuff to actually modeling, I don't know, that's not the right word, but a kind of curiosity about them that is also a curiosity about the child.
Yeah, I think that's the. I mean, when I can have the experience with parents that they are curious and they are, eager looking at what is happening, then I think a lot of the work is already done, because how can they, keep on using that curiosity? And that's what happened to that mother I just talked about. She's at times she's very tired, and she has a lot of issues on her mind. But when she's with her baby girl, she can say, "Oh, I just discovered what she did with this," and now she's starting to have porridge, and she have other food, and how the mother is astonished by how all the sounds that she can make when she tastes some food. And this little things in life, but it's a big start.
Well, I guess they're not experienced as little, are they? They're not that. I know you're fond of the concept of adaptation, which is so central to the DMM, and I wonder if you want to say a little bit about that.
Yes, I think because the adaptation is for me a concept that is more free and open. Attachment, when you talk about the assessing attachment, you have all these things that needs to be done. When you think about, for me at least, adaptation is more like what is happening here and now. And as I said, I can work with a parent from the PAA that we have done, and I can have an idea in the back of my head what the correct classification is. But we can talk about this from all kinds of perspectives, and I can hint about things, or say, "Oh, you thought he was so angry, but when you saw how sad he was, what did you think? What was that? You saw his reaction when you left him alone. How did that? Where did his anger go?" So you can, kind of use that, see how. So for me, that adaptation is about how the child is handling the here and now, and have the parents be curious about that. And also I think that as the DMM treats the concept of adaptation, it's more useful in a way when you talk to people who are not so familiar with DMM, because the concept of attachment, at least here in Norway, is on everybody's lips. It's either it's security, or it's this organization that has all these ideas floating around that about what it is and should be. And so for me, the concept of adaptation opens up the doors more than shutting them. And I think that classification of a dyad or of the attachment strategies, it's interesting and it's important, and it should be done properly. But the adaptation concept is more about how can you use your strategy or use other strategies in a new situation. So for me, sitting in front of the video with that parent and that child in view, I think you can actually give the parents a new situation and see if that strategy works.
Well, says it all really, but there are a couple of things I wanted to raise before I think we allow other people to ask some questions. But the first was, I think, the ethics of the strange situation and the PAA, because obviously it's an incredibly powerful procedure and it's aroused children. And I wondered what your kind of the issues around that and what your experience and feelings were around that.
Yes, it is. It is kind of a it is a setup where where stress is induced in the child, and of course I can it can be debated how artificial this is, but I think every child from around 1 year in Norway is left in the kindergarten by the parents. So you very early on in life here in this country, for most children, have a very early experience about being delivered to someone else's care. And so an everyday life with toddlers is filled up with separations and reunions. So that is not new, but they are in a strange place. And if the child is older, like 3, 4, 5 years old, they have an idea what is going on. And that can stress the child even more. So of course there are considerations around that, the ethics. But when I do the procedure, I have the mother or the father with me and say, this is how we want it to happen. But if you think the child is too stressed up, we will, shorten down the time so that they are in control. But I think, I think many parents can be very on the brink of upset or even start to cry when they see their child in the room being very upset. But that again gives a way of, opens up a door to talk about why were you upset. So I think there's so many things that we do when assessing families that are problematic and can be disputed as something that is unethical or on the brink of that. But I think that if we are just doing it and not opening up for to work with a parent afterwards to see what can we use, what use do we have of this? What can you gain from this? So that is the purpose of it, that the parent will gain something from this, learn something.
I wonder if sometimes we can be too afraid of distress, in the sense that hearing the opening up the parent to the child's distress, but also the parent becoming distressed within an environment that's sympathetic isn't always a negative experience. Otherwise, we wouldn't watch films that make us sad, or have, you know, sometimes experiences where we resonate more with sadness or distress than we do with kind of everything being happy all the time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that for many of those families I work with, the bad stuff has already happened. It happened years ago.
Yeah.
This is just peanuts. I know but it opens up for something. And as I always tell my colleagues, if the parents start to cry or get angry, I'm so pleased. The only thing I fear that people will do is to be just nothing, do nothing, say nothing, feel nothing, reveal nothing in their face. That's the only thing that gives me the chill.
I just had one more thing. I want to get time for everyone else, but one more thing to mention, which is kind of what I was going to start with, but we got onto other things, which is the age group, that early age group at sort of late infancy, preschool age group. Why attachment, you think looking at attachment is so important with that age group in particular?
Well, because when you think about compared to infancy, any parent understand that their handling of their infant is crucial to this infant's development. But when you come to the toddler years, from 2 years and up, you know, the child is beginning to be a nuisance. They have, you know, they kind of creep under the skin of their parents, and they're really taken, making themselves more clearly in control in many families, or at least the parents feel that infancy was easy. Now it's really difficult and challenging. So I think when you experience that many children in this age is also using coercive strategies, or are more in conflict with their parents, the parents address this as a big problem that they should punish or be harsh with. And so by looking at what's actually going on, what is beneath that is crucial. And to make sure that the parent can have empathy with their child. I think those cases where I have had the most problem in getting somewhere are those cases where the compulsive compliant or compulsive caregiving strategy is so smoothly going on with the parent and the child that there is no problem. The child is, you know, doing what the mother needs her to do, and picking on that can be very, very tough. But but you know, I think for any age group, to be able to understand how the child is adapting to their parents or to their peers, I mean, I think it's important, and to make sure that the parents still see that they have a big role to play with the child, even though the child can be very tough on the parent.
Is there, I think we've covered what we were thinking about, but is there anything that you wanted to say before we open it up?
No, I think we can open up. It's
something I wondered was if you could both say a little about what children and families of this particular age group are currently facing in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, and if you have any thoughts on how this might be impacting on this really important developmental stage, and also what families and professionals can do to support children to grow fully at this difficult time.
Mm. Oh my goodness. Recently there was published that the rate of child abuse had peaked in Norway during the 2020. And so what we had feared seemed to come true. And I think this reflects the feeling of being left alone and you have no one to turn to. Everything, or most things are shut down. You have very short time with the public nurse. You cannot bring the whole family. You're only one parent can attend with the child. And also when your child is in kindergarten, you have a queuing system, so only one family at a time can deliver the child. So there is the lacking of communication, natural communication between parents and those who are involved in the community with their family and the child is clearly affecting how vulnerable families are handling this. So this is a big concern, and I think that we will have years after this that we will need that professionals need to address all this and make themselves extremely available.
It's struck me that if we ever needed a reminder that parenting was not just done in a vacuum, that it wasn't just about parent and child, but is partly about a society, then this is it. Because you know, somebody can have a press conference in Downing Street or wherever the equivalent is in Norway, and then suddenly what's happened in the family has changed. Maybe all the partners are at home, where that wasn't the case before, where, you know, parents are managing jobs suddenly from the home and having to deal with their young children at the same time. You know, plus of course all the income kind of issues and the stresses of that. Suddenly there's the whole, you know, day by day, what the experience of the child of their parent can change through reasons that through issues that the parents have absolutely no control over, as well as also creating kind of threats that the parents are responding to. So they're negotiating upwards as well as downwards to the child.
Could you say a bit more about the interventions that you do and you know, kind of approaches you take and the kind of outcomes that you get? That would be very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that where I used to work in the psychiatry clinic, we had, I think that for many of the parents who came and who found this valuable and who stayed on, they had a better understanding of the child, and I could also have the experience they would defend the child. For instance, in kindergarten, if the child was, you know, the mother experienced that the child was criticized by the teacher for misbehaving, so the mother could tell, you know, he is actually quite anxious. So the mother could use the knowledge that we had been exploring. In the setting that I know now work, we can, you know, we keep track on our work from day to day, and I haven't followed up many families, but I have this one family that where the father just actually left the institution and went home, and the mother and the baby stayed on. And I think how that we have seen how she has started to take better care of herself and proud of herself in a way that she actually hasn't been for years. And that is her own, evaluation of it. But it's hard to say how will the long-term effects be, because after they have left us, they have to go to another community where we are trying to find the people who will support her further on. So what we see that she will benefit from is both using the videos, but also to structure her days. So she has a plan for the day. When will they have breakfast? When is lunch, dinner, etc.? What kind of menu should you have for dinner? I mean, this is how a parent with quite a she can just eat sausages for dinner for 2 weeks in a row if we didn't give her a plan. So, but she's fabulous with the kid. I mean, she's just doing great with that kid. So, but I think I don't have any research results, and it's just my impressions after doing this for ages. I've been in this field for 30 years. So
you I suppose I just try to tease out of you a bit some of the approaches that you use with the parents, because I know you've been somewhat critical, I think, of Marty Mayo. I don't know about the Circle of Security, and these other. There's quite a lot of different interventions around now for parents.
Yeah, because I think that interventions that has a clear idea of how to do and what to say. For me, it's something that is created during the work. That it's the parent who owns the problem and also the solution, and I can only offer them some way of looking closer at the problem and see possible solutions right in front of us, for instance, in the video. And I think Marty Mayo is a lot about stressing what the mother masters, and then maybe overlook some of the real issues in the child. That the child may smile even though it's very upset, and this is not included in the Marty Mayo conceptualization. And so, and also in the Circle of Security, as I said, it's much more you teaching people ways of talking about very, very individual issues. It's you and your child, and a lot of the teaching is about somebody else's children, and looking at videos and trying to compare that to your own life. I find that odd.
Yeah.
To say it carefully.
It seems like you're trying to move people away from teaching parents about relationships to folding back to their actual relationship with the child as it's going on in the here and now.
Right. Yeah, I think that is crucial to do, because parents are so filled up with strictures about how they should do things, and they are also very preoccupied with, you are the expert, you tell me. And it's a dangerous position to be in, because you could do so much harm. And I think, you know, this is something that I want to sort out of the room, you know, to just be, you are the expert on your child. What do you think? What do you feel? How do you understand what happened? I can have a long list of understanding point, you know, the ideas of what happened. But if the parent doesn't get any ideas or have a hypothesis or a theory, we have very little to work on. And so they might turn to me and say, what do you think? And I can give them a hint or an idea. And I say, I don't know, but maybe. And then this could feed them on some other tracks. So my idea is not to find out how to make sure that they will always do the right thing. I'm interested in how they are, the compassion they have for the child, even the child is challenging them. So the mother who told me that the boy was evil, I mean, she could have so much compassion for him. And she told me, she actually called me some weeks ago and said, I will never forget that. Remember that video? I will never forget that. Because she thought that her boy would be just like the father, who would threaten her with a gun. And he had actually threatened the boy with a gun. And then she thought that he is destroyed, that he was going to be evil.
So what was it about the video that she found so affecting? What was it that,
that he was so afraid. That he displayed so much anger when she was in the room, and then when she left, he fell apart. And she could see she had never seen it. She had actually never seen him like that.
Do you work with parents who both either have their children or have been separated from their children, i.e. their children maybe have been removed from their care?
Yeah, I work with foster children. I worked with foster families for many, many years. And from way back when I used to work in Oslo, in Aline, I had a project where when we knew that the child would go to foster care, we would have an assessment of the attachment relationship to the mother, so that we could, you know, inform both the mother and also the foster mother about what could be the issues here. And that was also very helpful for you know, the respect of the child's strategy, because when many foster parents who receive, you know, who become foster parents for younger children expect the child to be, you know, wanting closeness, being on their lap and, you know, being cuddled. And that would, for many of these children, would be the most dangerous thing they would experience.
So would you already have had an assessment then, I'm assuming, made in respect of the family that would have went to you for you to base your work on then? Or is your starting base?
Sorry, I say that again.
So would you already have had an assessment sent to you by somebody else, and that would be the basis that you began your work with the family on?
Oh, well, at that time, the family would come to this center for an assessment if they could still have custody for their child. And in some cases, it was impossible.
Right.
So when that child was removed, we started to work on understanding the child's primary strategy with the primary caretaker, and see how that would help the foster parents to be respectful of this child's initial strategy, so that they would, you know how to be predictable, for instance, and talk and make sure that the child was not feeling intruded upon or endangered by their, you know, they wanted to embrace, and that was, yeah, in some cases scaring for the child.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a question that came to me directly, that was sent to me directly. You talked about top-down interventions creating harm, and I wondered if you could say a little, or she wondered if you could say a little bit more about what kind of harm that is. What is the that kind of danger that we can create that way?
Well, it's maybe danger is a harsh word, but I think that when we're talking to when you're talking to the parents about how they think about things, they, in my experience, they very often try to figure out what I'm thinking about, so that their response is in synchrony with what they think I want to hear. And also I think that many parents, at least those I work with, don't think they have much to say. They feel that they don't have the experience of being listened to, or think that they will say stupid things. And so they will say, I don't know. And then, this mother cannot reflect. She doesn't know. She's, so you have all these, can have all these ideas about what defines that person. So this is actually how that mother I was just talking about that I work with now, she would say in so many settings that, I don't know, do you remember if your parents ever made dinner? I don't know. I mean, she couldn't even the easiest thing to remember from the childhood, she would say, I don't know. But when we were actually in a situation, we talked about making dinner to make sure that her daughter would have the smell of dinner in the house, she would say, oh yes, I know how that felt like. Mm. So you have to work with so many memory systems, not only the top of your head.
Well, it comes back to the distinction you made earlier on. We were talking between the correct and the real. Mm. That too many, by focusing on the correct, the sort of abstract theoretical understanding of what's going on. Yeah. We can lead parents away from the real in terms of what their actual experience is. Yeah. When faced with their child, or when parenting their child, or in the situation about when it's dinner time or bedtime or going to school or whatever, or nursery in this age.
And the erroneous thing is that so many of these parents are actually there themselves. They want to say the correct things. Yeah. They don't want to talk about the real stuff because they are maybe think they don't want to hear it, or that when they talk about the real stuff, we'll say, "Whoops." Yes, indeed. So, I mean, the internet is filled with cupcakes and all the big fancy things that parents should be occupied with. And these parents, I mean, they indulge in this and think this is the real thing. And their own reality is nothing to consider, to talk about.
And I think parenting is shot through with moral judgments, even more than attachment. I think it's easier, that the parents are afraid of being judged to be bad or wrong. With attachment, it's even easier to talk about strategies than, one strategy being an adaptation, and then another with caregiving and parenting. We all want to be sensitive parents. We want to be judged to be good parents versus bad parents, and I think that's quite hard to get away from.
And it's all about being secure, and if not, it's all you're doomed in a way. So well, so I think there is a lot of work to be done to just give parents some other experiences. So that's what I find rewarding to do, and So I'm not so preoccupied by doing the right things all the time and being correct on my, evaluation of this and that method. I'm just thinking, how can we figure this out? What kind of information does the parent need? And I think, parents need to feel free to observe. And when they can observe what you are observing, I mean, there's so many Care Index tapes out there. You can just see that the parent knows exactly that this child does not want to look at me. And the parent looks at the camera and, you see the looks of their faces, the sadness, and then they start and trying to make believe, that you're trying to fake it in a way, just so that we will be happy.
When you're working therapeutically with parents who seem motivated to say the correct thing, what do you find helpful in terms of enabling them to be more real rather than correct?
Well, there are so many ways to do this, and what I always hunt for is a response, a reaction. As I said, if parents get sad or angry, that's where you have an opening. And when parents are displaying nothing, it's hard. There's a hard work to get through that nothing, because you need something. Something must go on in the parent just to make sure that you have an opening. And then anything can actually happen, and you can talk about anything. But if you have a video that is, for instance, I with this mother I'm just working with, we had a video where the child is starting to roll around, and mother was, playing with her, and suddenly the child rolled over, and she was so and she started to cry because she was, well, what happened? And you just saw on the mother that she stopped and withdrew. She withdrew like this, and then after some seconds started to say, oh, what happened? Oh, and then looked at the camera. And that was such an instant that we could talk about, what happened, what did you feel, what did she feel? And I talked with her so many times about how afraid she was to do bad things to a baby, because that's what they told her that she'd done to her son 18 years ago. She had done bad things to him. And so this came back like a ghost. And this was extremely important topic that we talk about on many occasions. So I can guess when she looks the same way, are you now afraid? Is this coming back to you? So you have myriads of opportunities to go into these things, actually.
Thank you, Ben and Bente. And there is one final question that's in the chat, and it's probably worth mentioning because it's been there for a little while. Oh. I'll just read that out for you. So this says, thank you for telling us how you use the PAA and Care Index in clinical work with families. Very interesting. Perhaps you should do research on this way of working with families if you are into research now. And I'll just extend that question and ask, is there any literature on using the PAA and Care Index in clinical work that you can recommend people have a look at?
Oh my goodness. Well, I can assure you that I will not do any research. I'm an old grandmother now. I just have, I will work a few more years, but research is not something that if I haven't done it before, I will not start now. if there are any literature on this, I'm not sure what to say. I don't think there is anything written on using these observations clinically in therapy, but I did write something for I can send it. I wrote something on this topic for a book from the Helsinki University. I think Andrea Landini wrote something about on therapeutic work with adults, and we had this meeting where we presented stuff, and I presented some that was more based on the care index. And I had hoped to write something about my clinical experiences last year, but when COVID came and everything shut down, I had to change work. My my mind went other places. But well, it would be interesting if somebody would do it.
Steve, there's Steve. Who wrote the chapter? There must be a chapter on the PAA in your book. The Routledge Handbook of Attachment, Volume 2 assessment, surely? I know there's a chapter on the care index by Ari Hautamäki.
Yeah, oh yes.
I'm trying, yeah, I'll have to look.
Yeah. You do that and you send it around.
P.O. Spanberg did the care index, of course, up in Sunderland.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, it's a really good study that where they used it as a screening tool and tried to get as many people as possible to take part. And then they offered health visiting to the middle range families and the at-risk families. They gave psychotherapy to at home, and they had and they used the strange situation to look at the results of the intervention, and it was very successful.
Yeah.
And they Sunderland Health Board took all the funding away, like you would really.
Yeah.
And I think Barrow, I don't know whether Katrina and Alison Tooby. There was an SAA study. Susan, you might know. I don't know whether it was therapeutic or not.
Oh, I was just thinking of another study that I'm aware of by Daniel Schachter. He used the strange situation and he watched the videos with the parents. And I think the name of his chapter was something mothers can change their minds about their children.
Oh.
I could find it. I could send it to this.
Oh,
to
please
this group.
do. Please do.
But Steve, what was the question you were asking me when I was preoccupied?
It was about, I'm just looking at my book. It was about, do you know other studies using the care index or PAA therapeutically, and whether Robson and Tooby, the SAA studies with the PAA, I don't know whether they use them therapeutically or not. Do you remember?
No, I don't. I don't think so.
No, I think they have used the AI in some cases.
Right.
To work with them, with the parents. I'm not sure if they use any of the video-based assessments to work therapeutically.
I just add that all will become clear in 2 weeks because they're presenting for us.
Ah, good. Then we can ask.
The P.O. Svanberg study Steve's talking about is published in Clinical Child Psychology and Psychiatry. I think 2010. It's in that edition, which has quite a number of DMM articles. I mean, he's published it elsewhere as well, but I think that is the most recent one. That was interesting as well, because the sad thing was that they had just managed to show that all their interventions basically paid for itself through the lack of take-up of universal services, if you like, when the funding was withdrawn. But it's a powerful study of the effects of early intervention.
Sorry, I just got it out. The Routledge book, it was Doug Tetty actually wrote the chapter on preschool with Boram Kim. I think you're quite unusual, Bente, as far as I know, in using the PAA therapeutically. I don't think many people do that.
No, but I think, Steve, when you put someone in front of the camera and they're in the clinical, they're there for a purpose.
Yeah.
It should be used for some purpose back. Not just to, I know everything about you, just you go ahead. I'll write it in the report.
Yeah, I do like that about what you do. I mean, I think there is a very, ethically it's uncomfortable at times. As you said, a lot of assessing goes on.
Right.
But even feedback is probably patchy at times, let alone an intervention to follow. So when they come to you, they do get a relationship and an ongoing service and some thinking, which is good.
Yeah, and I'm thinking if we are assessing something that the parents are not wondering about, that we are, assessing something that someone else wants, and the parents doesn't have the clue why.
Yeah.
And so I think, well, even if I do screen, or do a developmental test on the baby, I'll make sure that I explain to the mother the reason why I did this was because I wanted to see, if you have this this item where if the child is looking for something that fell on the floor, and the mother would, do you want me to pick it up? I said, no. I just want to check if the child looked what fell on the floor. So, to explain what you're doing, giving information, what you're checking up on, why you do this and that. I think this is extremely important. And I think that parents who are used to being under scrutiny, they say yes to everything. And you just do a lot of things and they have no idea why. And, I know I've been in that position some years ago, and it's very uncomfortable to think about it. So I think that when it comes to something that is about relationships, about how to deal with self-protection, protecting your child from danger that is going on, I think it's crucial that we make sure that parents understand what we are doing and why we are doing it, and what the outcome is, and how can this be useful for the parents.
Yeah.
And not just to be like, you're this kind, you use that strategy, oh poor you, it's like the ABCD. You think, if you're disorganized, there's nothing you can do about it.
Another question has come into the chat.
Yes.
If you don't mind me reading this. So I found very interesting the distinction between what is correct, projections, expectations, and what is true, accurate, non-judgmental observation. I wonder if the tension between these two stances is also present among various agencies involved in supporting the family/children. How can we overcome this barrier, tension, in order to secure consistency, multi-agency work? Or is this tension, in fact, something beneficial?
Well, I think that when we work with families, we must make sure that we are working with them, and that we make that clear in every possible instance that we have, either in bigger meetings with the child protection services or whoever else is involved, that we are working with them and that we are open about the problems, and also that we will think about with the parents what is the solution to this. I think that many of the families that we work with are endangered by being objects in this dance between professionals. And I don't think there comes anything good from that. The intentions of professionals may be glorious, but the effect is what is actually giving the clear signals to the families what is going on, so what the effect it has on them. But of course, we also need to make sure that children are not endangered, that we know that we can work with parents that are not able to take care of the child. But then make sure that we can say we tried this. We know this was very hard. We have the family I work with now, the father left the institution, and it was impossible. I mean, he was really struggling to understand what we were doing and why he was there, and he was quite impaired. And when he came back to visit, I was really stressing with the others that we have to meet him with respect and to be polite and say, "So good to see you," so that he in that moment could have the experience that he was welcomed.
It struck me, working in a residential centre, very often there was such expectations on the family that I began to reflect on what kind of attachment strategy would be best needed to get through the residential assessment. And it probably wasn't a B. I wanted to, but there was the bit of me that wanted to set up a research study where this ethically possible, to get a nice B-ish family and put them in the residential centre and see what they were by the time they ended up, but also see what was kind of made of them, because yeah, I strongly felt compulsive compliance without too much trauma to muck it up, kind of almost what the services were needed, rather than authentic relationships, which actually might have been quite frightening to professionals.
Yeah, I fully agree, and I think that this is what parents understand. And when they can't fake the compliant, they run out of the room just to make sure they don't expose us to their anger. But so that's why I think the real thing, anger and real sadness, that's what I treasure in working with the families. That's where you have the opening for something that is real, more real than the compliance.
You raised your hand, Catherine, or was that?
I did, and then I've decided to put it down because it seemed like the conversation had moved on. But I think just picking up on the point of the challenges of working with different agencies and child protection in particular, we have such different languages and differences in understanding of risk. And I say that from having been involved with a service that was set up in Norfolk, offering a therapeutic as well as psychiatric service for mothers and babies who were high risk, basically at risk of babies being removed. And the challenge of being able to find a common understanding between agencies about what the risk was and what was required for change was a huge challenge, and it required very regular communication and joining social care in meetings on a weekly basis to kind of generate that common understanding. But just to say, in terms of evidencing the use of care index and also the meaning of the child interview, and Ben will be aware of this, our group actually wrote a chapter recording our service and our use of the care index, the meaning of the child interview, and how those informed our therapeutic approach to these families. And it was published in Penelope Leach's, she was the editor of a book called Transforming Infant Wellbeing, Research, Policy and Practice for the First 1001 Critical Days. And we wrote a chapter describing our project and the tools that we used and some of our outcomes, our provisional outcomes. And we found the combination of the care index, the meaning of the child interview, which we haven't mentioned this evening, as well as the AAI in combination, very helpful for these high-risk families. So, and we had some really promising results, including not only sometimes babies staying with their families, but recognizing risk early and knowing when to remove the child.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, could you pass on the how to find this?
Can you write it in the chat, maybe?
The reference or
the reference in the chat.
Well, I think what you did say is that I think that we, together with the child protection, can create a mutual ground to work with the families. That what we say when they come to our facility is that you want us to assess this and help this family to stay together. This we will do, and then we will have you as a co-partner in this work, so that we regularly have meetings to make sure that we are on the same track. I think that is crucial. And also, I think the work you do before families move into the facilities, that you have a good discussion about what can be the hurdles here, what is the problem. We've had families where only the mother was really motivated and the father wanted to come, but he was also very, there was a big issue if he would sabotage the whole thing. So have these discussions before, as we are prepared, so that we know that we can focus on what we should do. But I think, well, I agree that we look differently at risk, but I think open communication and making sure that we acknowledge the differences and then talk us through that, instead of thinking that everything will solve itself, because it won't.
So Bente, I have a last question for you. It's a bonus question that we've asked everyone so far. So, if you were on a dangerous desert island and you were there with 3 people, which strategies would you like for them to have?
Which
self-protective strategies would you like for them?
For the 3 of them?
Yep.
Oh. A big variety from the whole circle. Well, maybe to combine the A3 with a C3, and maybe well, I would not have one Donald Trump strategy person with me. And well, it was well, I think a variety. It was kind of unprepared for me to answer such a question. I never thought about that. I was thinking I was going to pick some people. And I would need a bigger number than only 3.
Thank you, Bente.
Thank you.